Welcome back, everyone, to Let's Talk Business, episode number 6. I am your host, Rick Jenkins, and I appreciate you coming back with us. And we have our featured guests, plural, with me now. And I am really glad to welcome Secretary of Commerce Harry Lightsey and William Floyd, who is the Executive Director of SCDEW, to the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
It is good to have you guys here. We were talking right before we came on air, and these guys, our studio is located, of course, in Greenville, and these guys have made a trip from Columbia over to Greenville to join us on the show to have a conversation today about the statewide Education and Workforce Development Act. It was passed a couple months ago, and we want to find out all about that and what that means for businesses in South Carolina and for economic development in the Palmetto State. It does have some interesting layers to it that I think are going to impact all of those, and we'll find out all that from these guys here in a second. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you guys about, just real briefly about you on a personal level for a second. I had not had a chance to meet either one of you before a few minutes ago. And Mr. Secretary Lightsey, we'll start with you. You're a South Carolina boy, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Columbia.
Yeah.
Went to Dreher High School, graduated from Dreher, went to Princeton University undergraduate, came back to South Carolina, graduated from the University of South Carolina School of Law, and then had a legal career that was mostly in the telecom world. Worked for several of the Bell companies. About the last 10 years of that, I had management responsibilities and retired from AT&T in 2009. And then in 2012, I went to work for General Motors in Washington, D.C., with responsibilities for emerging technologies in the automobile industry. So my corporate career really spanned the telecommunications world and then the automobile world.
That is quite the resume that leads you into a job that one could say is potentially the most important job in the state of South Carolina these days. And I see you hesitate for a sec as I said that, but I believe that one could make that argument.
Well, it's an interesting job, and it's a great department. I think you'll probably hear Director Floyd say the same thing about his agency, but the people that are in the Department of Commerce are incredibly dedicated public servants who are really working every day to enhance the quality of life for the citizens of the state of South Carolina, and it's exciting to be around them.
You have been in the job for a couple years, appointed by Governor McMaster. When was that exactly, sir?
2021.
Okay. And so a little over 2 years.
Right about 2 years.
You replaced Bobby Hitt.
Yes.
And you have had a nice run of it over the past couple years. We have had some serious economic development announcements. It seems like this state has been churning out serious economic development announcements for a long daggone time, right? But the last couple years, we've looked pretty good.
We've done incredibly well. And, the last year, 2022, we announced over $10 billion in capital investment in our state, creating over 14,000 jobs. But these are very transformational times. You'll hear this over and over again today. The things that are going on in the country and in the world create a dynamic that makes this a truly transformational era that is impacting not just South Carolina, but the entire Southeast and the world in general.
And William Floyd, sir, you have been in your present job only a couple months now. As the Executive Director of SCDEW, the Department of Employment and Workforce. You been there, like I said, a couple months, but tell us about you. Where were you before? What led you into this chair today?
Sure. I'm a South Carolinian by birth.
Yes, sir.
I have lived here all my life, but my practice has taken me to most of the states of the nation. So I grew up all over South Carolina, both little towns and big towns, and in between. And one thing led to another. I went to law school and then began practicing labor and employment law, and did that for 35 years at 2 different law firms. And it was a privilege to represent the many employers out there in both in South Carolina, large and small, as well as outside of this region. Right. And the common denominator for them is employees, qualified employees. So when I was working as a labor employment lawyer, I was sorely tempted to go into public service to see it from the government side, to see how we can help on a more lasting basis. And that's what led me to DEW. And through DEW, the Department of Employment and Workforce, we're able to work from the outside, truly from the government, trying to help this wonderful issue that we have in South Carolina, and that is so many jobs and not enough people. And we're trying to match them up because of the great potential there.
Tell me about SCDEW and what it does.
Yeah, like Secretary Lightsey, it's a privilege to be part of the team at SCDEW, so the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce. And we do several things, and all of them are focused on employment and workforce development. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we do first and foremost is connect people with jobs and jobs with people. In addition to that, we have economists who help us look ahead and see what jobs are going to be needed in the future, what jobs are needed now, so they help us chart the course. And then, of course, as we saw during the pandemic, sometimes we hit tough times economically, and we need to fall back on a safety net of unemployment insurance. And so we did that a little bit during the pandemic, as a lot of it as a nation, a little bit in our state, but the governor really had us opening up, and we were far in advance of all of our peers, and that really led to some of the great successes that we're enjoying right now. But that's what we do at DEW. We connect people with jobs and jobs with people.
Mr. Secretary, tell me about Act number 67, the Statewide Education and Workforce Development Act. Give me that elevator speech on this act and what it does for South Carolina.
Yeah, well, as far as what I think it does for the state of South Carolina is it really places accountability and responsibility for our workforce, for getting folks ready for the jobs of the future in one agency, which is DEW. And I think that is a great thing. Having too many cooks in the kitchen and too many different and disparate efforts going in different directions, uncoordinated, created some communications issues and coordination issues that I think this act really addresses by simplifying responsibilities, and that's certainly why we support it.
So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the biggest parts of this act is it simply moves some things from under the Commerce umbrella to under the SCDEW umbrella. And so you touched on it, but tell me why that matters. First of all, tell me what those things are. There's two, I think, specifically that we want to talk about, but tell me what those things are and why does it really matter that they are under the umbrella over here of Mr. Floyd and not under Commerce? Right.
So the two things we had a group of folks who worked in the state, throughout the state. They each had a geographical territorial responsibility, and their job was to work with the schools in that particular area and the employers in that particular area and help students understand what employers were in their area and what they were looking for in terms of employment opportunities, and to really facilitate those kind of communications. And they were called Regional Workforce Advisors, or RWAs. And that group of folks is being moved from the Department of Commerce over to DEW. In addition to that, Commerce had the responsibility for running an organization that was called the Coordinating Council for Workforce Development. And the Secretary of Commerce was the chair of that. And it was largely made up of a variety of state agencies and leadership of state agencies whose agencies in one way or another connected with workforce development for the state. And it was an overall coordinating committee. And the responsibility for that is now shifted to DEW. The director is the chairman of that coordinating council. The Secretary of Commerce retains a seat on the Coordinating Council as a spokesman for the business community, and we certainly will continue to work on that and to be there to represent what we're hearing from the business community. But having that over at DEW, which has the expertise that you've just heard about, and has such broad other responsibilities with regard to workforce, we believe is the appropriate move because they're the group that has the most of the responsibility for the state in terms of workforce development.
It sounds like that what was your purview. You sit on the council, you chaired that council, and now you are chairing it. So from your perspective, what does this mean?
This means good things for South Carolina. Commerce has done an incredible job selling the opportunities of our state and to create new employers with a great number of jobs or needing employees. And so to meet that opportunity, the Coordinating Council for Workforce Development has, through this bill, through the act, has expanded. I call it a tent. They broadened the tent a little bit because what we found is that a number of state agencies were having a little pieces of the workforce development that needed to be done. But there was a sliver here and a sliver there, but it was often not as coordinated as it should have been. And so by broadening the tent to bring some other agencies in there, as well as other stakeholders, employers, small employers, large employers, our public officials underneath that tent, then we can better understand what everyone's doing, align those efforts, coordinate those efforts, and communicate those efforts to those who really need it, the parents, the students, the job seekers. That's what this bill does.
Regional workforce advisors, how many are there?
There are a total of 12. We currently have 10 of those slots filled. They've been filled. At Commerce, they have assembled a great team, and we have 2 of those postings that are open now that we'll be filling soon. They're essentially the connection point, or part of the connection point between school to work.
And of course, they are set up in some type of geographical nature. And what does that look like?
Yeah, they are aligned with all the local workforce areas, which have preceded them, and so they are each assigned to normally a multi-county area to work with the guidance counselors, the superintendents, the teachers of the various schools, normally high schools, sometimes middle schools.
Tell me what are, however you all want to handle this or answer it, what are their responsibilities? What are their main responsibilities?
I'll go ahead and start. Their main responsibility is to understand the local employer's needs, communicate that to the educators, and the educators communicate back to the employers so that we can fine-tune what I call the pipeline, the education pipeline, of make sure what the students are learning, that they know their options after they're leaving, that they understand while they're there and learning in school, high school, middle school, that they are achieving the education goals they need to achieve, doing the skills, refining the skills, so that if they want to, they can go straight from school, high school, directly to work. Some of the marvelous jobs that are out there. Right now we have more than 100,000 jobs currently open in the state. So someone right now coming out of high school even would have that opportunity given the proper skill and communication to go to one of those jobs. So the RWAs are part of that connection point between those employers and the educators. There are others that do that too, but the RWAs, we're fortunate to have them at our agency now.
I have this conversation with a lot of people sitting on this show. I've had the conversation and want to continue exploring here a little bit with people like Dr. Tim Hardy, the president of the South Carolina Technical College System, or maybe Dr. Keith Miller, who's the president of Greenville Tech locally, or our friends at Lockheed Martin, or BMW, or wherever that might be. And it's this. In South Carolina, of course, manufacturing is king. Advanced manufacturing is king. We've gone from a textile supported workforce in South Carolina to more of an advanced manufacturing world that we live in. But you know what? We're continuing to have trouble making people understand. And when I say people, I think I really mean moms and dads, because that is who is that's who the kids are listening to some degree, right? We're having trouble making moms and dads understand that these advanced manufacturing jobs are not what you might think they are. And as I always say, this ain't your daddy's manufacturing, right? It ain't your granddaddy's manufacturing. And if I'm in your all shoes and I'm really thinking about what these regional workforce advisors do, in my mind, that there would be something there about them trying to convince moms and dads and show moms and dads what these jobs really are. You know, you're not turning a screwdriver and a bolt on a car. You might be managing the robot that's doing that, right? I mean, it's just a different look to things. So tell me, do you all have those same concerns? Do you hear those same types of things? And is that the same kinds of things that the RWAs are discussing?
The short answer is yes. The RWAs are part of the team that are communicating those opportunities to the parents and the students, just part of it. But what we found is that more communication is needed because there are wonderful opportunities out there in the workforce. And you don't have to go to a 4-year college to go and get one of those opportunities. You don't have to have a PhD to do that. Rather, you could go to one of Dr. Hardy's schools and within either months or a couple of years, be able to write your ticket to a wonderful job that's going to be pay family sustaining wages long term with little or no tuition that person would have to invest. And you compare that to the typical 4-year track or longer. And it's something that the parents and the students need to understand, that it is different in South Carolina, different in a good way because of the wonderful employers that Department of Commerce has brought to our state, that you can achieve for your family things now that you couldn't have done previously without some higher education. There's a place for all that education. The workforce pipeline is what I call it. Education is the biggest feeder of that. So it's important that the students learn during elementary, middle, and high school, but they also learn about the opportunities, what's at the end of that, and they are untold. And part of what the Coordinating Council for Workforce Development does is by getting all these agencies together and stakeholders, we look at different ways to communicate that information. And we look at different ways to do it pervasively as well. So as we continue moving forward with the CCWD, we will put an emphasis on communicating digitally, video, etc., so that the parents and teachers and their students will know about these opportunities.
We have always evaluated our education system by how many of our kids are going off to college, and what kind of colleges are they going off to? Are they going off to elite colleges, or are they going off to state universities, or what type of colleges are they going off to? And that is just incredibly misplaced. We should be evaluating our education system by what types of jobs their graduates are occupying. And I think, those are some of the things that we need to start talking about.
Agreed. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back to finish the conversation with Secretary Lightsey and Director Floyd. Don't go anywhere. Be back in about 60 seconds.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Let's Talk Business, a weekly one-of-a-kind B2B talk show with interviews with South Carolina business executives, community leaders, and government dignitaries. Let's Talk Business airs every Saturday at 4 p.m. on 94.5 The Answer, or download it on the most popular platforms, Apple, Google, and Spotify. You can watch the video of each episode on YouTube. Search Let's Talk Business South Carolina. Now let's get back to the show with your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher Rick Jenkins.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to Let's Talk Business. I'm your host, Rick Jenkins. Appreciate you joining us. And once again today, I am sitting here right now with South Carolina Secretary of Commerce Harry Lightsey and Executive Director of SCDEW, William Floyd, and we are talking about the Statewide Education and Workforce Development Act. And gentlemen, again, thanks for being here. Appreciate you joining us again today. Let's talk about this act in terms of how it impacts South Carolina businesses. Tell me, Mr. Secretary, let's start with you, sir.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the businesses we have, both the existing businesses that are here in the state, the new businesses that are coming to this state, we've talked a little bit about their needs in terms of workforce. And make no mistake about it, every business we talk to, whether they're small or big, whether they've been in the state for 100 years or whether they're just coming to the state, their number one issue is workforce. Am I going to find the kind of workers that I need to be successful in my business? And that is their top issue, without a doubt. It is incredibly important that we can show them that this state is working hard on that issue. And I think this act reflects that. And by putting the responsibility in the one agency's hands, they know where to go, they know who to look for. My agency, our mission is to create economic opportunities that increase choices for all South Carolinians. And our vision is to embrace the future. And that really is the core mission of our agency. What we are really focused on is creating opportunities for our citizens. And that's where our expertise is. We don't have deep expertise in terms of workforce development, work experience in terms of connecting people with jobs. That is really not within the wheelhouse of my agency. And I think that this act, by moving that responsibility over to DEW, which does have huge responsibility and resources to address our workforce issues, is going to mean an incredible amount for the business of South Carolina in addressing their number one issue.
Director Floyd.
Yeah, the Coordinating Council for Workforce Development provides what, again, I've described as a tent. And government does not have all the answers by any stretch. Having worked with employers for over 35 years in the private and public sector, nobody has all the answers, but together, by collaborating as partners, we can come up with refined, applicable answers. So the CCWD will include public officials, public agencies, but most importantly, large and small employers too, as we literally come to the table together to try to, for example, set a path, I call it the blueprint, Unified State Plan of Workforce Development. So we look ahead, and we're going to be hearing from the employers, and we've already heard from employers, and Commerce has heard from employers about different ways to approach it, be it apprenticeships, internships, dual enrollment with our technical colleges. Those are just a few of the ways. It is not one size fits all. Some employers have more opportunities and needs than others. Not all employers are really big. Most of the employers in South Carolina are smaller. And so it's our opportunity to meet them where they are and provide this information both from economists, from employers, from public sector, of coming up with ways and approaches to address their workforce needs.
We talked in the beginning about the Coordinating Council, the council that is moving, of course, from the Commerce umbrella to the DEW umbrella. How many people are on that council?
Over 30.
And tell me the types of folks we're talking about.
So one segment, probably the predominant segment, are state agencies that are touching on workforce development. Some more so than others, but all of them are touching on them in one way or the other. So we have agencies. We have elected officials that will be there as well, appointed by the House or the Senate, for example. We have large employers, we have small employers on there as well. We have education on there represented as well, and technical colleges as well as the four-year schools. So that's what's coming to the table. And between all of those, we're going to be working together to come up with strategies and opportunities to address these issues.
Gentlemen, I appreciate it. Appreciate you both being here. It's good information. Anything else to share with our listeners or our viewers before we go?
Yeah, I just would like to say one thing. I think, you made a great point about the fact that the jobs that are here in South Carolina today, the factory of today is not like the factory of my youth, and it's certainly very different. But what I think is really critically important is that the jobs in our businesses 5 years from now are not going to be the jobs that are here today. we are going through this incredible transformation. We're dealing with technologies like robotics, like artificial intelligence, and digitization that are going to transform, I think, every business, whether it's small or large, in ways that we can't even begin to imagine today. So I think, this is an issue that will continue to be the number one issue that business is facing. And I think that by putting this all with DEW, it gives us the opportunity to be very proactive and very forward-leaning as we lean into this transformation of business, to look at not only what the jobs are here today, but what are going to be the skill sets that are going to be needed for our students and our citizens to be successful in the world of tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. That is Secretary of Commerce Harry Lightsey and the Executive Director of SCDEW, William Floyd. Folks, that completes another episode of Let's Talk Business. I'm glad you joined us. Again, as always, check us out on 94.5 The Answer, or you can access our podcast on any of popular podcast platforms that are out there. Or, again, we have a weekly YouTube video series. And regardless of how you join us, I appreciate it. Thanks, and we will see you next time.